Hello everyone. In this video, I would like to go over linear functions. Linear function has two variables, x and y, in an equation of a straight line. There are three forms of this linear equation. It could be in slope and intercept forms. In this form, y equal to mx plus b. As you see that I mentioned earlier, linear function is an equation of a straight line, but you note that inside this equation, there are two variables, x and y, as representing the Cartesian plane, the x and the y-axis. So these two values for x, values for y, are depending on each other to form this linear function. There are three forms of this linear function. The very first one is slope and intercept form. The second one is point slope form. And the last one is called general forms. So in this particular exercise and lesson, I will go over these three forms, and I would like you to distinguish the difference between all of them. They are representing linear function. Because they have three different forms, they perform in different ways. Okay, so you have to recognize certain variables inside this type of equations. Okay, so very first one is called slope and intercept form. It has y equal to mx plus b. I would like you to note that on this side of the equation, is on your left hand side of the equation, you only have y. Okay, so the coefficient in front of y is 1. So this is just y equal to mx plus b. So they say that this equation you are fully solved for y. That means you only have one y remains on this side of the equation, and the rest are going to the other side. And on the other side, you have m times x plus b. So m, as we learned in previous lesson, is the slope of a line. Okay, so in here, I would like to write for everyone, m is the slope. M is the slope. Excuse me. Let me have a sip of tea. Yeah, I have been fighting a cold, so is the slope. Excuse me. I guess they want me to write. Is the slope. All right. So I don't understand why it didn't let me. So let me try this. Okay, let me try this. Yeah. So let's try it in blue. So m is the slope. And m is the variable in front of x. You see that? And then plus b. This plus b here is like a symbol, but you in the actual equation you have a number, and this number, including the sign in front of it, it is called the y-intercept. Okay, so this is the y-intercept, meaning that x is equal to 0. So when x is equal to 0, you substitute into this equation to solve for the value for y, and you will have it equal to b. So in this case, you could have 0 and B presented as an ordered pair. So this ordered pair or this coordinate is called the intercept. Okay, so I will clarify all this for you later when I do an example, but for now I just want to introduce the concept of the linear function or an equation of a straight line in the form called point-slope form. I mean, point-slope form is here, but this one is slope and intercept form. Okay, so this is called the slope and intercept form. Y equal to mx plus b. Specify very clearly that m is the slope of this line and b is the y-intercept. So the next one I want to point out to everyone is the point-slope form. So you see that is a little bit different here. You see, because of a linear function, you must have y and x present in this equation. So you do have y, you do have x. So there's a point, x1, y1 is the point that given to you. So x1, y1 is the point on this graph. Okay, any point given on the graph or given right on the Cartesian planes. So let me take this, I should say is a given point, okay? So this point, you expect that it's given to you. Okay, m is still the slope. Okay, m is the slope. So see it's very clearly indicated point and slope form. So the point you have here is x1, y1 and m is the slope. So they will be given to you and you will use this to form the equation for this particular linear function. So it's a given point, or I should say that it's a given coordinate. Okay. Okay. So in terms of x and y, but I specify here as x1, y1. All right. Okay, the next form we are going to examine is, you see, this one has x and y inside this linear equation. So linear function has two variables, x and y. So keep that in mind. Why do they call it a function? Because you can change the value for x, you can change the value for y. Because it's on the Cartesian plane, you can pick any coordinates and substitute into the equation. Okay, so therefore it's called a function. A function has two variables, x and y, and they depend on each other to form the equation, to form a straight line. So this is called the general form. And in here, you still see the presence of x, the presence of y, because the variables x and y are the most in all of this form. So in the linear function, you will find y and x, you will find y and x, you will find the slope, you will find the intercept, you will find a point, but in this general form, you don't find any slope and any point. And what are the A, B, C in this case? Okay, so A, B, and C are integer. So what does I mean by integers? Integers, that means you have whole number and they are positive or negative. So you cannot have a decimal. So you cannot not have a fraction. Integer are like 1, 2, 3, -1, -2, -3, etc. Okay, so we already learned about integer. So when I mention integer, I hope everyone understand what they are. Okay, so after we know the three form of this linear function, we are going to work with in between three of these. Okay, So I will do a few examples and clarify to you why you have to learn all of this form. Because sometimes the information is given to you, you need to figure out what form you can use in order to recognize your slope and your y-intercept, and you have to manipulate the equation itself in order to pull out the slope and the y-intercept. Okay, so let's work with the first example. Okay, so it said determine the slope and the y-intercept of the following linear function. So it's giving to you this equation like this: negative 2x minus 3y minus 9 equal to 0. So when I look at this equation, I know for sure that they are giving me a linear equation in general form. So it's in this form right here. You see that? It's ax plus by plus c equal to 0. And in this case, I have a as negative 2, b as negative 3, and negative 9 equal to c. So these numbers are just integer. They have no indication of whether or not they are a slope or the y-intercept. So the one thing you need to do is you need to transform this general form into a slope and intercept form. So here, right here, slope and intercept form, y equal to mx plus b. Okay, it's given to you as general form. So what you need to do is you need to transform this into the slope intercept form. Then from there you can figure out the slope and you can figure out the y-intercept. Okay, so then the question here is how are we going to do that? Then go back to this. I would like everyone to pay attention to this one. Okay, so just highlight it for everyone. Y equal to mx plus b. And I mentioned earlier that I mentioned earlier to everyone that y equal to mx plus b. Note that you are solving for y. That means you only have y on this one side of the equation, and you put everything over to the other side of the equation. Okay, so in order for you to do that, you must solve for y. Okay, so I'm going to put it here that I'm going to solve for y. What do I mean for solve for y? Solve for y, it means I have to bring everything not having the y over to the other side of the equation, and the coefficient in front of y has to be equal to 1. So I will leave the negative 3y on this side first. Okay, I bring negative 2x over to the other side. It becomes plus 2x plus 9. Okay, so we already learned how to solve for the equation in previous lesson. So at this point, all we do is just we are reviewing the excuse me. Okay, I just want to just another sip of water. Okay, so negative 3y equal to plus 2x plus 9. So again, what you see is I need to have just 1 in front of y. So I have to divide everything by negative 3. Okay, it is an equation. Therefore, whatever I do on this side of the equation, I have to do the same thing on the other side. So now you see that cancel out. I only have 1 y left. And on this side, I am going to rearrange and write it like this. Okay, so negative 3 divided into 2 is the same thing as I write negative 2 divided by 3. Alright, okay. So if you take the calculator, you take 2 divided by negative 3, you should have a negative value. And then negative 2 divided by 3, you also have a negative value and they are exact same. So it's okay to write it like this, negative 2 over 3. And you probably ask me, why do I write it like this? Because I want to specify this one as the slope m. Because I want to write it as y equal to mx plus b. You see that? Okay, so this m here will be my slope, and this b here will be the y-intercept. As I mentioned above here with this equation, y equal to mx plus b. So we transform this into a y equal to mx plus b. So what you do is you have 9 divided by negative 3. So it will be equal to negative 3. So this value is your y-intercept. Okay. So therefore, from this equation in general form, I have to manipulate the equation, solve a y, bring it into this form, and from this form I can read the slope from it, I can read the y-intercept from it. So let's see what this graph looks like. Okay, so this graph will look like this. So this line here is the equation for this is mx plus b, right? So let's go back and see what we have. So this equation is negative 2x minus 3y minus 9 equal to 0. And we are figuring out the slope as m equal to negative 2 over 3. Okay. So the negative slope, the line that's landed that this way has a negative slope. So it's true. What about the y-intercept? The y-intercept is when you have an order pair with x equal to 0, and the y-intercept in this case that we found is negative 3. Okay, so this is your y-intercept. Make sure that when you indicate the y-intercept or the x-intercept, you must write it as a pair, an order pair. Okay, so let's check. So y-intercept when x equal to 0, y equal to negative 3. So right here is negative 3. So if we count, here is negative 1, here is negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. So right here at this point, this line cuts the y-axis at the point 0, negative 3, which is the y-intercept. Okay. So this point is 0, negative 3, which is also the y-intercept. Okay. So let's move on to the next example. I kind of go very slow with this, and I hope everyone will recognize the difference between all the form. Okay, so this form here is called the general form. It doesn't have any indication of the slope or the y-intercept at all, but this form will give us the very clear indication of the slope and the y-intercept. Therefore, you need to manipulate this equation, solve for y to pull out the value for your slope and the y-intercept. Alright, so now for example number 2, this question asks us determine equation in general form of a straight line which passes through the following points. Okay, so I have to write the equation in general form given these 2 points on the graph. Remember that we did last class, you have 2 coordinates on the Cartesian plane. You can go ahead and connect them. Okay, connect them, you will have a straight line. And this straight lines, what you need to do, you must write the equation for this linear function that involving these 2 points. So I'm going to write out the step for everyone to follow. Okay, so step number 1 is to find the slope using these 2 points. Or these 2 coordinates that given for us. And what we do is, remember m equal to y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Okay, so since you have that, what you need to do is you need to identify your y2, y1, your x2, x1. Okay, so don't forget the pair appears like this, x and y. Always the x comes first and then the y as second. This representing a coordinate. So the very first one, I always identified it as x1, y1, and here's my x2, y2. So you want to identify it like this. Okay, identify a pair like this. Okay, the very first one will be your x1. The second one will be your y1 because this is an order pair. You identified it as x1, y1. So this is your point number 1. This is your point number 2. Okay, your point number 2, the coordinate, the very first one is the x2. This one is the y2. So that's how you distinguish the difference between the two. And then from there, you can identify y1, y2, x1, x2, and you substitute into this equation. So I will substitute into this equation, given that. So right here I have minus 9, minus, don't forget I minus the minus 8, so I put that in the bracket. So x2 is 2, minus minus 3, I put it in the bracket. Okay, so here we need to perform our algebra correctly. So negative, negative give me a positive, negative, negative will give me a positive. So then, in the end, I have negative 1 over 5. So then my slope equal to m, right? Negative 1 over 5. Don't forget this, the notation m is for the slope and equal to negative 1 over 5. So this is your step number 1. Okay, so step number 2 is this. So you have to determine the equation of this one. So what you do is you have to go back to this. For what I already indicate to everyone that point slope form, you are going to use this point slope form in order to figure out the equation for this particular question. Okay, so don't forget y and x are the 2 variables and they must be present always. M you already figure out, x1, y1 you have that because you identify that point. Okay, so I am going to write right here that I'm going to use point slope form. Y minus y1 equal to m x minus x1. And then I substitute it into this equation. So leave the y alone, okay? Because you must have x and y in this equation. So what is your y1? Your y1, you identified it earlier. So these are the 2 points, the 2 coordinates, okay? So y minus y1 is minus of minus 8 equal to, what is your slope? Minus 1 over 5. You just found that, right? And then the next part you have to write is x minus x1, which is minus of minus 3. Okay. So now we need to apply our algebra correctly. Okay, so y now become negative negative make it a plus 8 equal to negative 1 over 5. Just leave this for now because I am going to show everyone how to transform this into an equation in general form. Okay, so inside this bracket, I should write it by x plus 3 because negative, negative make that a plus. And the next step you must do, as we have done, learning the general equation for solving for fractional equation in previous unit. So I would like everyone to take the 5 and multiply over to the other side of the equation. So divided by 5, multiply over, we bring it over to the other side, we multiply by 5. But you must multiply by the entire binomial on the other side of the equation. And what you have left is just a minus 1 left on this side. So here, divided by 5, bring it across the equal sign. You must change the operation. You must multiply by. Okay, so multiply by 5. Now I'm going to open up this distributed rule, apply distributed rule. That means I have to multiply each of this inside the bracket. Minus 1x minus 3. Alright, okay, so 5y plus 40 equal to minus 1x minus 3. So what you need to do next is your equation in general form is ax plus by plus c equal to 0, where a, b, c are integer, right? So what you do is you bring everything over to one side. So this will be plus 1x, I just write plus x because it's 1 negative 1x, bring it over, it's a plus 1x, I don't have to write a 1. So plus 3 equal to 0. Collect this two term. So I have x plus 5y plus 43 equal to 0 is the equation in general form given the points of negative 3, negative 8, and 2 and negative 9. Alright, okay, so that is my step number 2. Step number 2 is to use the point slope form, and my step number 3 here is, I'm going to write down here for everyone, okay? Step number 3 here, which is I have done, is to use algebra to turn the point slope form equation into general form. Alright, okay. So let's see what if we have any more example. No, we don't, but I have an exercise practice here for everyone to work on. So let me quickly go over this. Alright, so don't forget, I only have 1 minute left for this video, so I have to be really quick. So don't forget that we have 3 forms, right? Slope-intercept form, point slope form, and general form. So this point slope form will allow you to transform an equation from this form to the general form. But from general form, you can manipulate it, solve for y, so you can pull out the slope and the y-intercept. Alright? Okay. Thank you.